So I see the YouTube has just started, so we should be starting in just a sec.
Yeah, okay. Can everyone hear me?
Yep.
Okay, we just worked it out, so I'm gonna let everyone in at the moment. Let me do that. Okay, everyone is in. Go ahead, Audrey.
Good evening. Oh, sorry, just want to make sure I was off mute. Good evening. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 7:03 p.m. Welcome everyone to the Monday, May 11th, 2020 City of Burlingame Planning Commission meeting. For all in attendance today, please note that this meeting is being streamed live on YouTube and will be uploaded to the city's website after the meeting. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you place yourselves on mute as sounds transfer easily and can be disruptive. Please note that there are several ways to submit comments during this meeting. You may send your comments by email to publiccomment@burlingame.org. Staff will be monitoring emails submitted during the meeting, which will be read at the appropriate time. The length of the emailed comment should be commensurate with the 3 minutes customarily allowed for verbal comments. You may also submit your comment using chat in Zoom by clicking on the chat button located at the bottom of your screen. Staff will then read the comment at the appropriate time. Additionally, you may raise your hand in Zoom by clicking on the participant button located at the bottom of your screen and then click raise hand. Members of the public who are participating in the Zoom meeting by phone can dial *9 to raise your hand. So moving on to agenda item number 2, roll call. The record should note that all 7 members of our commissioners are present this evening. On to agenda item number 3, approval of minutes. We have draft meeting minutes to review and approve from the February 24th and March 9th, 2020 regular Planning Commission meetings. Are there any comments, changes, or discussions on the minutes? I see there are none. Any motions?
Madam Chair, I'll make a motion to approve the minutes for February 24th and March 9th as revised.
I'll second.
Okay, who was the second? Was that Sandy? Commissioner Camarado or Commissioner Sargent?
Sandy can have it.
Okay.
Thanks, Rich.
Thank you. I have a motion by Commissioner Terrones, seconded by Commissioner Camarado. Any discussion on the motion? Do we have to do a roll call?
Yes,
vote?
so I'll be doing the roll call vote just because as we just saw, it's hard to sometimes hear if everybody talks. So roll call, Commissioner Camarado,
Yes.
Commissioner Gall,
Yes.
Commissioner Loftus,
Yes.
Commissioner Sargent,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
I believe that I need to abstain because I wasn't on the commission for those 2 meetings.
thank you, Commissioner Terrones,
Yes.
and Chair Say.
Aye.
Thank you.
So the motion passes with a vote of 6-0-0-0. Oh, 6-0-1-0.
Yep, perfect.
All right. Moving on to agenda item number 4, approval of agenda. Staff, are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes to the agenda.
Thank you. Do we have any recusals? Yes, Commissioner Sargent.
I'll be recusing from 8D, 217 Channing Road. I have a financial interest in property within 500 feet of the property.
Okay, thank you. Any other recusals? All right. Oh,
Through the chair, Madam Chair, this is Kathleen. I would just want to note that we'll have to renote that recusal when we get to that
Sure.
point in the record so that we have it next to the item. And also just for commissioners, there's been an update in practice for how to handle these Zoom calls. When you have a recusal, what you do is mute yourself and turn off your camera for the duration of the item so that you are visually leaving the room. And then you turn your camera back on when you're done.
thank you. All right, so moving on to agenda item number 5, public comments, non-agenda. Members of the public may speak about any item not on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to suggest an item for a future Planning Commission agenda may do so during the public comment period. The Ralph Brown Act, the state local agency open meeting law, prohibits the Planning Commission from acting on any matter that is not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes each. A timer will sound at the end of the time. I may adjust the time limit in light of the number of anticipated speakers. Please speak clearly into your microphone. Do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on any item that is not on our agenda? We don't see any raised hands. Director Gardner, do you see anything?
There are no comments in the public comment email inbox. And I am not seeing any in the chat. So I do not believe we have any requests for public comment.
All right, then, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Agenda item number 6, study items. There are no study items this evening. So we will move on to agenda item number 7, which is the consent calendar. Items on the consent calendar are considered to be routine. They're acted on simultaneously unless separate discussion and/or action is requested by the applicant, a member of the public, or a commissioner prior to the time the commission votes on the motion to adopt. We have one item on the consent calendar, which is 2217 Davis Drive. Would any member of the public or the applicant like to pull this item for discussion? Or would any member of the Planning Commission like to pull this item for discussion? Again, I do not see any raised hands. Oh, sorry, take that back. Commissioner Sargent has his hand raised.
I was just going to make a motion at the appropriate time.
Okay. Are we seeing anything from the public? I see none. Commissioners, any comments, motions? Commissioner
I
Sargent?
move we approve the consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Sargent and I believe seconded by Commissioner Loftus. Any discussion on the motion? May we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Camarado,
Aye.
Commissioner Gall,
Aye.
Commissioner Loftus,
Aye.
Commissioner Sargent,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
Aye.
Commissioner Taronis,
Yes. Chair
Say.
Aye. So the motion passes 7-0-0-0. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $1,045, which includes noticing costs. Congratulations. Moving on to agenda item number 8, regular action items. We have agenda item number 8A, 250 Anza Boulevard. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding this project? Seeing none. Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
Yes, the project involves the replacement of the existing driving range at the Burlingame Golf Center with a Topgolf commercial recreation complex. The proposed building would be 3 levels with 102 hitting bays, as well as a restaurant, bar, outdoor dining area, and indoor event space. The outfield perimeter would be completely enclosed by transparent netting ranging in height from 90 feet to 199 feet high, secured by steel poles. In addition to the internal building areas, an external mini golf activation area would be located on site as part of the project as well. The project would include 475 parking spaces provided in 2 parking fields surrounding the main building and driving range. Access to the Topgolf site would be provided through a shared access driveway along Anza Boulevard, as well as proposed driveway connection to Airport Boulevard. In summary, the applications before the Planning Commission for this project involve design review for construction of a new commercial building and conditional use permit for commercial recreation use with associated restaurant and bar on a property zoned unclassified. The applicant is in attendance for questions, but first we're available for questions of staff. And I'll note that Parks and Recreation Director Margaret Glomstead is also here for questions.
All right. Do we have any questions for staff? Sorry, I can't find the raised hand section. All right. Nope, looks like none. Great, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please step forward and state your name and anything else you would like to add for your project?
Yes, this is Tanner McKelly with Topgolf, and I am the Director of Real Estate Development representing the company. I just want to first say that I applaud the City of Burlingame for making the Zoom meeting possible. It's pretty impressive that you're still able to hold these planning commissions in such great times, and so applaud you for that. I next want to just thank staff for the tireless efforts that they've made over the course of the last probably year and a half or so on the project. It's definitely a unique one. Probably not something that staff sees every day. And so we certainly appreciate the amount of time that they've put into the project, specifically Catherine and Margaret. And so I would just like to say on behalf of the company that we're excited about this opportunity and look forward to moving this project forward. It's a unique one for us, positioned well in the market, and we're very excited to, like I said, move forward with the project. And myself and a representative from our GC partner, Arco Murray, who I'd also like to thank, who's put in a ton of efforts into getting us to where we are today, is here to answer any questions that the commission may have. So thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Sargent?
Yeah, I just had one question. I just wanted to make sure I understood the proposed traffic flow. Is the primary entrance going to be on Anza or Airport?
Eric, you want to take that one?
Well, I'm having a hard time actually defining the primary entrance. The address is on Anza Boulevard. Our intention has always been that the Airport Boulevard access was the secondary access point.
Okay.
But also an important access point to Topgolf nonetheless.
Okay.
And I apologize, Eric. My name is Eric Ubelar with Arco Murray, the GC partner that Tanner had alluded to. So happy to be here and echo all of Tanner's sentiment to everyone's hard work as well up to this point.
Thank you. Commissioner Torrones?
Thank you. I don't know if this is a question for the applicant or maybe it's a question for you, Margaret. But I don't know if you had a chance to see Russ Cohen's letter asking if we might be able to take advantage of some opportunity for some landscaping, some city identity particularly on the slope that faces out towards the lagoon area.
Yeah, we did see the letter. I saw it today. The challenge is that's outside of the scope of their work. So that hillside is city property. So that would have to go through, that suggestion of his would have to go through a different method, but not part of the Topgolf project because it's not within their lease boundaries.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
Commissioner Gall. Commissioner Gall, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't have my unmute off. You got me now?
Yes.
Okay, I have a couple of questions. The first is for the applicant about the netting for the birds, and I saw on your the Brooklyn Center project, you guys also use squawk boxes. Is that something you considered here, or have you looked at the amount of birds that are going to be flying around there? I mean, I know that this is the bay with the bay right there.
Yeah, it's a good question. So squawk boxes are actually something that's standard at all of our venues. We've addressed it in the CEQA document as well. And so Dave Powers could also speak to this, but just Topgolf as a brand, we have quite a bit of experience just given how tall our nets are and the numerous locations we have in sensitive areas where there are large migratory. It is a large migratory environment. And so for this specific location, we've worked with the Audubon Society. We've had a couple of meetings with them. And we have a mitigation measure in place that basically reviews, bird impacts and so forth. And there's adaptive management plan if there is issues. Largely, barrier netting is not something where there's scientific data that says that netting is impactful or not impactful. I can tell you that the netting that we use is the same netting that's used in aviaries and is also used to help protect birds from hitting glass buildings, which is one of the larger causes of bird death in the world. And so I'm getting a lot of background, so hopefully you guys can still hear me. And so we're quite confident in what we have, and that monitoring process goes for 2 years. And so we hope that this actually proves to be an opportunity for the Audubon Society and other groups to learn from this project and understand how netting is or is not impactful to the avian wildlife.
Okay, so but at the current design, you do not have the squawk boxes included, or you do?
Oh no, I'm sorry. Yes, this project will have the squawk boxes included.
And then my other question has to do with the turf out there. That's all natural grass out there?
No, it's artificial turf.
Is it? That's artificial. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then on the irrigation for the other parts of the project, have you considered any sort of gray water watering or rainwater retention?
Eric, I'll let you take that one.
Yeah, we have considered. I still understand that the city doesn't have any sort of purple line available, and so we know in order to meet essentially the LEED certifiable design criteria that we're going to need, we are going to look at needing to harvest some of the rainwater for irrigation. Our options are somewhat limited in how closely we need to make sure we don't allow any water to infiltrate into the landfill cap. But we do, between bioretention, we do expect that there'll be areas for harvesting some of the rainwater for irrigation.
Okay, that's all I have. Thank you.
Yep, thank you.
Commissioner Camarado.
So I wanted to thank you so much for bringing this project to Burlingame. I think it'll be a great place where everybody could hang out as soon as we can all hang out together and have some fun. So I do want to thank you for that. And then I think my only other question was raised by Commissioner Sargent, which was the entrance. So you've answered that, but thank you for all your hard work and can't wait to see it open. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner.
All right. I don't see any other raised hands. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak on this item? Or any comments received through email or the Zoom chat?
No comments through email or through the Zoom chat.
Okay, then I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, comments? Motions? Commissioner Torrones?
Thank you. Well, we've seen this project a couple times now. I appreciate the clarifications that have been made. I'm accepting of the findings in the environmental assessment. So based on that, I can make the findings for the design review. Some of the critical criteria, more important than others, being that this is somewhat of a unique location. I could also make the findings for the conditional use permit based on the mitigation that's been done, which kind of goes hand in hand with the next item being the mitigated neg deck. But with that mitigation, I can't see this as being any sort of major detriment or injurious to other properties in the area. So I can make the findings for the conditional use permit. I'm accepting of the mitigation measures that are identified in the environmental assessment. So I could also make the findings for the mitigated negative declaration. So I think it's a nice project. I think it should move forward.
Thank you. Commissioner Sargent?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Torrones, and I move we approve the project with the findings in the staff report.
Okay, Commissioner Loftus has his hand raised. I just wanted to see if he wanted to add to the discussion.
I was going to make a motion, or in this case, I will second the motion. I'm very excited. I was excited the first time.
Great. So I have a motion by Commissioner Sargent, seconded by Commissioner Loftus. Any discussion on this motion? We would please have a roll call vote.
Roll call, Commissioner Camarado,
Aye.
Commissioner Gall,
Aye.
Commissioner Loftus,
Aye.
Commissioner Sargent,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
Aye.
Commissioner Torrones, and Chair Say.
Aye. Great. So we have the motion passes 7-0-0-0. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $1,045, which includes noticing costs. Congratulations. All right.
Yeah,
So
thank you all very much.
thank you. Have a good evening. So moving on to agenda item number 8B, 850 Burlingame Avenue. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding this project?
Madam Chair,
Yeah.
Commissioner Loftus and I sit on ad hoc Citizens Advisory Committee, meeting with the architects and Margaret and other city staff. So in one of those committee meetings, I was able to get a preview of what's before us this evening. So I had a conversation with the architects and with the city staff.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
Yes. Just very briefly, in 2018, the City Council approved the new Burlingame Community Center located at 850 Burlingame Avenue. This application includes a request for a fence exception to allow an 8-foot tall fence located along the east property line, which is located adjacent to single-family residences on Burlingame Avenue and Concord Way. Don Merks from Group 4 Architecture, Architects for the Community Center, has a short presentation. So with that, I will pass this along to Don.
Okay.
And yep, you are unmuted. Go for it.
Yes. Okay. So if you could go to the next slide, please. So good evening, everyone. And pleased to be giving you the presentation on the sound wall exception. As you look at the site plan, Plan North is to the top, Burlingame Avenue is to the bottom of the slide. Our package 1, the early site package, which had the completion of the playground, is shown over with the green outline on the left side of the slide. And our package 2 community center construction project is just getting underway and is shown over on the right. The property line and the fence that we're talking about is the fence that's between the parking lot and the residential neighbors to the east. So currently, as you go to the next slide, there's a existing fence that separates the parking lot from our neighbors. And this fence is kind of what might be considered a mismatch of fencing, very organic and grown over time, and very different materials, different heights, definitely existing trees, and well vegetated. As we're looking at the next slide, there's one more slide that shows some additional existing photos. The current rec center is actually closer to the property line than our proposed new center. The proposed new center moves further away from the residential property line and is set further back. We've also taken the opportunity to pull back the underground parking as far as we can from this property line, but really want to maintain as much existing trees and vegetation as we can. So the proposal that's been worked out with the neighbors, in collaboration with the neighbors and selecting of material as well as color, is on the next slide, is an 8-foot high fence that runs the majority of the fence line, but does step down to match existing fences on either end. The 8-foot concrete sound wall has a wood material imprinted on it. We are using pile foundations so as to retain the existing trees and to work around the existing trees as best we can. And then we're actually vegetating that wall with a nice green shrubbery in the front that you can see on the bottom elevation there, as well as the existing trees. And then on the next slide, I think we have a larger image of the proposed material that we are proposing to include on the fence. And so I think that gives you a general overview of the proposal for the sound wall and concludes my presentation.
Great, sorry, I was muted. Thank you very much. Do we have any questions for staff or the presenter? Let's see, lost all the okay, I don't see any raised hands. Going to open the public hearing.
And we have noticed as we've been running this, the chat button does not seem to have appeared. So if there are members of the public wanting to comment, it must have been a setting that we forgot to check when we set up the meeting. So the remaining opportunities are still other opportunities to, there could either be an email to publiccomment@burlingame.org, which for this item, I do not see anything. Alternatively, if somebody in attendance wants to leave a message, or sorry, to make a public comment, they can raise their hand using the raise hand function in their on the screen. I'm not seeing any raised hands either, and apologize, we're not quite sure why the chat function isn't working, but those other options are available. There is also the option to press *9 on if somebody's using a phone, and that will raise their hand as well. But that said, I do not see any raised hands or emails in the public comment email box.
Okay, great, thank you. So I'll close the public hearing then. Commissioners, comments? Commissioner Sargent?
Well, since if nobody else is going to say anything, I'm happy to start. And I think this is a fine application. I think it fits in well with the rec center. And, you know, I think it in many ways mimics the existing condition in that there's a solid fence there, and in several places there's lattice above it that exceeds the 8 feet we're looking at. And so I can support the project or the application, and I move we approve the application with the findings in the staff report. And if I just make a further note, you know, one of the things we always have difficulty with the fence height exception is finding the exceptional circumstance. And I think in this case, the exceptional circumstance is the difference in zoning between single family residential, the neighboring properties, and a parking lot for a public recreation use right next door. So I can make the findings for the fence exception.
Commissioner Loftus?
I would echo everything that Commissioner Sargent said. It seems like a very straightforward solution to a problem that needs to be addressed, and so I second the motion.
Thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Sargent, seconded by Commissioner Loftus. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, I see none. May we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Camerado,
Aye.
Commissioner Gall,
Aye.
Commissioner Loftus. Sorry, can you?
Aye.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
sorry.
It's okay. Commissioner Sargent,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
Aye.
Commissioner Tronis,
Aye.
and Chair Say.
Aye. So the motion passes 7-0-0-0. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council with 30 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed, called up and reviewed by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $1,045, which includes citizen costs. Congratulations. Can I ask commissioners to mute your, if you are not speaking, to just mute your window so we can, I know we have some paper shuffling that we need to do between projects, so just so everyone could hear. All right, we're moving on to agenda item 8C, 212 Bloomfield Road. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding this project? Okay, I don't think I see any hands up.
Sorry,
So-
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry?
Sorry, I did have an ex parte communication.
Okay.
I had a conversation, a brief conversation with Mr. David Harris, who has written us one of the received afters regarding the project.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Sargent?
Yeah, I had a brief conversation with the applicant about the project.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Camerado?
I also had a brief conversation with the applicant after the second rendition of the application.
Okay. Let the record note that all commissioners that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
Yes, the applicant proposes to replace the existing one-story house at 212 Bloomfield Road with a new two-story single-family dwelling and detached garage. The application was most recently reviewed by the Planning Commission on March 9th, where the application was denied without prejudice. A denial without prejudice allows the application to be resubmitted with changes. Changes to the project include reducing the massing at the front of the house by including a 9-foot porch plate height with a slipped roof from the second floor to the first floor plate. Sorry, sloped roof, beg your pardon. And then modifying the lot coverage and floor area, redesigning the roof framing to reduce the massing on all elevations, and reducing the height by 7 inches. In summary, the request is for design review for a 2-story single-family dwelling and detached garage. The applicant is available for questions, but first I'm available for questions of staff.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? I don't see any. So I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward, state your name and anything else you would like to add about your project?
Yeah, hi, this is James Chu. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So, so basically, we modified the layout and the roof design to accommodate the new front, which we reduced the overall massing, and the front porch is also at 9 feet plate height. Other than that, I think we comply with the design review guideline, and hope you agree and approve the project tonight. And I also want to make a note that Bob Gilson is also with me tonight, well, on Zoom, and he would like to make a statement. Bob?
Hi, I'm Bob Gilson. Just want to let everybody know that we've gone to great lengths to change it, and hopefully everybody likes it. I want to make it clear also that Dave Harris continues to make reference to this being a spec house. It's not a spec house, it's a house for my daughter that we're building. Also on the corner of Burlingame Avenue and Bloomfield is a new house being built with high gable. It's a very modern house with high gable roofs and standing seam roof. Doesn't fit into the neighborhood at all, but it's a very attractive house. Things do change, and property owners do have rights. So I just think that now with the changes that we made, I think we've met all the criteria. Hopefully you like what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Gall?
Yeah, I just have one question for James. On your letter dated May 4th, you say the front setback has been increased from 17'7" to 24'7", but that's not in the revision of the design. Is that from the original house that's there now to where you are?
Sorry, that was a typo. There's no change on the front setback.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yeah, hi. On the side elevation, there's one small roof area that seems to be called out as standing seam metal roof. And I'm not seeing any other areas with standing seam metal at this time. Is that something that's left over from previous version, or is that intentionally one area that's going to be a different roof material?
I'm sorry, that's probably left over from a previous design. So we will make the change to a composition to match the rest.
No worries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item?
I am not seeing any emails in the public comment at burlingame.org. If any members of the public would like to speak, they should raise their hands using the raise hand function, or press *9 if they're using a telephone.
I'm just going to give a few seconds here for the public to speak up. Okay. All right, then I don't see anything, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments? Commissioner Loftus?
Yeah, I think the changes are improve the house quite a lot, actually. I think that the issue has always been the apparent mass of the house for me, and I think for most of the commissioners. And the designer, Mr. Chu, uses a strategy that I've seen used several times, including by Mr. Chu, around town, that really does a good job of bringing the mass down. That's the roof sloping away from the front property line. So that one change makes a huge difference. It makes the apparent mass of the house, it diminishes the apparent mass of the house pretty significantly. And he's been able to maintain the functionality with the shed roof and the small dormers sitting on that sloping roof that's falling away from the house. It changes the nature of the porch significantly. So I really like the changes. I think he's done a good job of addressing the concerns, at least my concerns.
Commissioner Torrones?
Thank you. I agree with Commissioner Loftus. I think that the changes are subtle but critically important. The one other that I would like to elaborate on, the other revision, is pulling in the second floor 2 feet along that front side of the house on either side. I think that's important because what we were saying in the previous meetings, and we've also seen this with a few other applications that have been before us, effectively what we had before was a 2-story house with some planted on overhang on the sides that really weren't anything more than, like I say, a 2-story house with some overhang adornment. But in this case, by pulling in those side elevations on the second floor, additional 2 feet, we have a more substantive roof that slopes up from that first floor plate height of the porch and breaks that second floor eave line or plate height that I mentioned in previous meetings that we had on the second floor. So I appreciate the revisions that have been made. And I think that the project is approvable at this point. Thank you.
Commissioner Camerado?
So I really like what James did with the front porch and bringing that massing down over the columns. And I just think it looks really nice, and I appreciate the applicant for making the changes.
Commissioner Schmidt?
I just want to echo what the other commissioners have already said. I think the scale is a lot better in this version versus the others. And I think the revisions do make it a lot more attractive and scalable in the front. Thanks.
Commissioner Sargent?
Yeah, I would agree. And I move that we approve the application with the findings in the staff report.
I'll second that motion. So we have a motion by Commissioner Sargent, seconded by Commissioner Say. All those, I guess we'll have a roll call vote again.
Yes. Commissioner Camerado?
Aye.
Commissioner Gall?
Aye.
Commissioner Loftus?
Aye.
Commissioner Sargent?
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid?
Aye.
Commissioner Torrones?
Aye.
And Chair Say.
Aye. So the motion passes 7-0-0-0. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $1,045, including noticing costs. Congratulations. So moving on to agenda item number 8D, 217 Channing Road. I believe we have a recusal from.
Yes, Madam Chair, I'll be recusing. I have a financial interest in a property within 500 feet of the applicant property.
Thank you. You can please turn off your video. Okay. Were any commissioners not able to visit the project site, or do any commissioners wish to note any ex parte communications regarding this project?
Madam Chair, I did have an opportunity to meet with the project designer after the last meeting, just to discuss what was discussed at that meeting.
Thank you. Anybody else? Let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
Yes, an application for design review for a new 2-story single-family dwelling and detached garage at 217 Channing Road, zoned R1, was approved by the Planning Commission on June 24th, 2019. A building permit was issued in November of 2019 and construction is underway. The applicant submitted a design review amendment that was reviewed by the Planning Commission on March 9th. The Planning Commission continued the item to allow the applicant to respond to issues raised in the meeting. The applicant submitted revised plans, date stamped April 27th, 2020, and a response letter to address the Commission's concerns. In the response letter, the owner explains how they have further revised the elevations to bring down the scale of the project. The applicant is available to answer questions, but first I'm available for questions of staff.
Hey, are there any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you would like to add about your project?
Sure. Hi, it's Rob Waymeyer at RC Waymeyer Design. I really wanted to take a moment and thank Richard Tronis a lot. We, after the original meeting that we had and some of the comments that came back dealing with porch height due to the structural approval and requirements from the city. I reached out to Richard that night. He was kind enough to come out the next day, and he met with me and the contractor to really take a look at the front of the house and how that worked. And I think it was a really good, it's kind of a good lesson of how, you know, I think the city and the Planning Commission and the designers and builders in town can work together. It was very helpful to be able to walk through that with him. What we were able to do going through that on site was we actually were able to come up with some solutions to lower the scale down. We had assembled the front elevations for you in a way where you could see all three, what the original approval was, what the amendment was, and then what the revised amendment we turned in would be. Initially, the hope in the original design that we prepared that the commission approved, there was a net drop of about 11 3/8 inches below the first plate height for the bottom of that fascia. We marked that in red and tried to make it really bold so everybody could see that, as that would point out. In the amendment, due to that structural change, it actually was almost a 2-foot difference and went up to a plus 14 inches instead of a negative 11. Far too great of a distance, really changed the dynamic of the front of the house, which was apparent in the with the comments back from the commission on the previous meeting we had. After we took some time out there, I think what actually happened is the design actually, from our perspective, came out even better than hoped. We were able to, with the structural engineer, we were able to reduce the roofing down in the front somewhat, which helped pick up some of that space that was lost with lifting the front porch up. And then what we did is we replicated the design over the gable, the mini gable on the second floor, and had the tails of the rafters actually come down farther to meet you as you go up to the front of the house, to really help pull that massing down and kind of pick up some of the finer, smaller details that you see in that neighborhood. One of the other changes that we also made was, I think you can see it on the side, there's an elevation detail for the window headers. There was a conversation about the mold windows replacing 3 windows with posts in between. And to help bring some of that character and some of the detail back, we actually increased and made a little bolder, little larger, more traditional window header detail, which did 2 things. It gave some detail back to the window opening itself, more in scale with the size. And it also helped take a little bit of that void up between the top of the windows and the fascia line. Net out now, we're 5.5 inches below the first floor plate for the fascia and the porch, as opposed to what was originally approved at 11 3/8. So there's only about a 6-inch delta that's a difference.
which I think is much better. It's much more in line with what was approved. The tails of those, the rafters on that front gable, we did, however, pull those down so they're actually at the same line as the original location was, where they were just flush and they weren't, they didn't overhang and drop the way they did. That's all I have. I know Sarah Tierney Niogi, she's the homeowner, and she had a couple of items that she wanted to address with you as well for the conversation in regards to the siding materials. So I'll turn that over to Sarah, and I can answer any questions you guys have after that.
Hi, thank you. And this is my husband, Shamrat Niogi. We apologize if our 6 and 4-year-old run in here. We turned on the TV, but we couldn't get a babysitter because of shelter in place. So I wanted to start out by thanking the planning commissioners and the staff. We're so grateful that you've been able to move these meetings to Zoom. We're grateful for your public service and your commitment to the betterment of our community. And we wanted to express a gratitude for all the ways you've helped improve our project and the partnership and problem solving and the suggestions that you've made to drive a better outcome, not just here, but at the beginning of the process as well. Our team with Rob, our contractor, Kevin O'Shea, who's also available for questions on the line, and our structural engineer have worked really hard to try to find ways to mitigate the impact of this structural requirement. And we also really wanted to thank Commissioner Terronez for coming onto the site to, really understand what's going on and work with our team to think about how we could bring the human scale element back in line with the original design. And we appreciate the support that all of you have shown our family, our team, and so thank you. And we welcome any further collaboration that you have to offer this evening. I don't have anything else to offer on the porch, and Rob and Kevin, I think, can speak best to the structural requirements and all of the mitigation efforts that have been taken to try to bring the porch height down as low as it can be. I wanted to briefly address the hardy siding and the mold windows. Again, also in the spirit of collaboration. I think as we wrote in our letter, and I think as you know, in our original application, we had a request for hardy siding. And we've sort of just been monitoring what's going on with the commission and other homes in our neighborhood and around town. And we sort of thought that there could have been some reconsideration of that given a few projects that had been approved. The Chens lived 3 houses down from us while they were working on their project in Arundel, and we're aware that their project was approved. Another home, the Gilsons on Elm Street. And so that's sort of where we thought, oh, maybe this is something that's changing in Burlingame. That's why we brought it to you. It's been recommended to us by members of our team that although it may be common among older homes in our neighborhood to have corner boards with lap siding, that it's a lot less common and less traditional to have corner boards with the shingle siding. And so, and as we've driven around Burlingame and observed more houses, that made a lot of sense to us. So I think one thing that we wanted to offer tonight is sort of a withdrawal of the request for the hardy shingle at the top of the house, and to leave the cedar shingles there and sort of humbly request an approval for the lap siding with the hardy and the corner boards painted to match. I think especially we thought a little bit about a house at 28 Bloomfield, a few houses away from us, a few blocks away, a house that we admire very much that took that same approach. Moving to the mold windows, I think I, put some of that in the letter. Wasn't something that we really knew as an option when we came to the house. We'd be, really grateful if you'd be willing to approve them, and appreciative to Rob with the idea of increasing the size of the header on the lower windows to try to increase the level of detail and charm there. And we hope that you would be willing to approve all of the mold windows. We really like it from a design perspective and also from our choices on the inside of the home. I think if it's something that you feel really strongly about, one thing that I think one of the commissioners mentioned in the last meeting was that their issue was more at the front of the house. All 3 of the mold windows at the front of the house are in bedrooms, and it would be an acceptable outcome to us if you felt strongly that those not be mold. And we would really petition at least for the windows on the side and the back to be able to be mold. And we have a particular interest in a couple of them in the back. The kitchen window to become a 4-part glider window, which we see a particular increase in functionality. I'm not that big of a person, and to reach over the kitchen counter over the sink to be able to slide the windows open is a lot easier than cranking 3 casement windows. If I want to be able to watch the kids in the yard or like air out the kitchen after I make something that doesn't smell very good. I think also the kitchen window, it's over the sink, and we were hoping to sort of tile from the backsplash into, I guess it's called a jamb, a sill. And our understanding, it's a lot easier from a construction point of view if that's 1 mold window as opposed to 3 separate windows, that it's a little bit cumbersome with the tile and the construction of that. So those are the particular windows, and also the bifold doors with the transom we wanted to eliminate. And so we just started thinking about like putting up some window treatments and solar shades that it would make more sense for it to just be 1 piece, and try to have solutions for minimizing that summer heat coming in from the west in the afternoons, since that's the orientation of that window in our home. So I think, again, we would really be grateful if you would approve all the mold windows, but those are just some of the thoughts that we had, in sort of like a problem solving and collaborative spirit of trying to make the house fit in with the neighborhood and work with all of you. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Do we have any? Oh, yes, Commissioner Gall.
Yeah, I have a question, I guess for Rob. So the materials that you're requesting is the hardy plank lap siding and cedar mill 8-inch exposure. That's the one with the kind of the raised grain, right? As opposed to the smooth.
Rob, I believe your microphone is muted.
Oh,
sorry about that. You're right. Yes, it is the one with the raised grain that Sarah and Shamrod have been talking about with Kevin to put on the face of that. You know, I've seen it 2 ways. I've seen it done a couple of times, and I think when it's painted well, it does look very nice. The trick on it is the prep with the painting of that to really make it pop out the right way.
okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, do any members of the public like to speak on this item?
I am not seeing any in the public comment at burlingame.org email box. People may raise their hand if they want to speak from the Zoom meeting, or they may dial *9 if they're on a phone.
Okay, not seeing any raised hands. All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing. Commissioners, any comments? Commissioner Terrones?
Yeah, thank you. I like the changes that have been made. Where I had some particular concerns, as expressed previously, were in the height of the front porch and that main floor plate along the front of the house and that sort of high forehead that we were getting above those windows. So I think that the changes that are made bring it back within a realm where, again, as usual, looking at this in isolation, if what we're seeing now as proposed had come before us originally, I'd have a hard time saying that I would not have approved this that's now being presented to us this evening. So I think that the changes, again, are subtle, but I think important. So I can be accepting of those. In light of what the homeowners have presented, I think that they would be more satisfied. I really appreciate the fact that they've given themselves a tour of the Burlingame area, and I think that they'll be much more satisfied using the cedar shingles on that second floor and eliminating those corner caps. I can be accepting of that, and then therefore accepting of the hardy siding with the corner boards on the first floor. So I can accept the revisions that are before us in total this evening. Thanks.
Commissioner Gall?
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I have no problem with the windows being molded together. I think that there's enough beef between the windows when they are molded together that it will still appear as separate units. And as far as the roof goes, I think it's a good solution. I think that's helped out quite a bit. I appreciate going to the second floor and making those cedar shingles. But I still have a problem with the corner boards. I've been the most vocal probably about the corner boards. It just, to me, it works on some architectural styles. It doesn't seem to work on this. As a builder, I see it as a shortcut. There are other houses in town, I agree. I don't necessarily think that those are going to be are good examples of a corner board application. In walking the block, I saw that there were 4 other houses on the block that have vertical wood siding, and none of them have a corner cap that's like a 4x4. One of them has mitered corners, and the other 3 have like a 1-inch corner cap, which, again, when you get to that size of the 4-inch corner board, to me it looks like, well, this is just the easiest, quickest way to put things up. And to me, it doesn't say Burlingame in an older craftsman style home. So that, along with the cedar mill hardy plank, I think is probably the least attractive of all the options in the hardy plank. It just looks like it looks cheap or fake, I guess, because it looks like it's trying to have a raised wood grain. And if I was delivered horizontal siding that was in wood that has raised grain, I'd send it all back. So to me, it cries out that it's not a natural material. And again, I just don't think that part of this works in fitting in with the flavor of Burlingame and that old Burlingame feel. So I can support the roof termination changes and the window changes, but I'm having trouble with the siding.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes, I think that the changes at the front actually helped quite a bit. I agree, all that work that was done and negotiation on that, I think, has a positive outcome. I also actually think the change in the rear doors and changing that header height and everything, I think, has made a better solution back there as well. So I feel like both front and back got some improvements in scale. I think to me the windows will be fine. I'm fine with the mold solution as well. So I think I could support this as a project.
Commissioner Camerado?
I like the changes. I think there's been a nice work with everyone involved, and I appreciate the applicant as well as Commissioner Toronis having gone out there. So I can support this project as well.
Commissioner Loftus?
Agreed on many points. I think the changes are good. I like the changes at the front. I don't mind the mold windows. The only comment I would make, it seems to me we've been sort of given our marching orders about hardy plank siding. I will say that I agree fully with Commissioner Gall, though, that the raised grain makes the siding look cheap, and it would look more like wood if it were smooth. But you know, we've been given our marching orders, so I think the project is approvable, and I would propose that I would move that we approve the project.
I'm sorry, who was that second?
Tronis, I second.
Okay, thank you. Before, I just wanted to also just add that I agree with my fellow commissioners' comments regarding the shingles up on the second story and the improvements with the front porch and the structural modifications. I personally would love to see that front elevation receive the separate windows, but it's not a deal breaker for me if you prefer to go with the mold approach. But I also wanted to thank the Neogis for taking the time to craft that nice long letter to us, explaining your thinking and reasoning behind the changes and doing a lot of the research in your neighborhood to help us to understand where you're coming from with your material choices. So I just wanted to thank you for doing that. So we have a motion by, I think it was Commissioner Loftus, is that correct? Seconded by Commissioner Terrones. Any discussion on the motion?
Madam Chair, could I ask Commissioner Loftus, in terms of the motion, were you considering that included a condition that the second floor would be cedar shingles without the corner caps, or are you motioning?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought that was a good change.
Okay, then I maintain my second.
Okay, may we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, Commissioner Camarado. I think you need to unmute. Yes.
Yes, aye.
Commissioner Gall.
Nay.
Commissioner Loftus.
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid.
Aye.
Commissioner Terrones.
Aye.
And Chair Say.
Aye. So the motion passes 5-1-1-0. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing. It must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $1,045, including noticing costs. Congratulations. Okay, so moving on to agenda item 8E 556 El Camino Real. Would any commissioners, were all commissioners able to visit the site, and does anybody want to note any ex parte communications regarding this project? Commissioner Terrones?
Yes, I did have a conversation with the new project architect for the project, just discussing some of the details. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let the record note that all commissioners present have visited the project site. Can we hear the staff report, please?
Yes, the applicant is proposing, sorry, let me just make sure I'm here. Yep, okay. The applicant is proposing a new 5-story 21-unit residential condominium building with below-grade parking at 556 El Camino Real. The garage would utilize an automated mechanical puzzle stacker parking system with each space independently accessible. The Planning Commission most recently reviewed an earlier version of this project in 2018. That project was denied based on the configuration of the fully automated parking system. The resubmittal has been made with changes to the mix of the units, a corresponding reduction in parking commensurate with the changes of the units, and a change in the parking system to a puzzle stacker configuration. While the previous fully automated system was unprecedented at the time in Burlingame, the puzzle stackers have been approved in a number of residential and commercial projects here in town. Regarding environmental review, the previous project was reviewed with an initial study and mitigated negative declaration. Since that time, there have been changes to state law which allow the project to be reviewed with what's called a Section 15332 infill development exemption. However, that said, staff notes that the mitigation measures that were identified in that previous study have been retained in this current version and are now included as conditions of approval. As a housekeeping measure, I'll state for the record that as a multifamily residential project, the project is subject to the Housing Accountability Act, which is state legislation. It limits the ability of municipalities to deny or reduce the size of a project that otherwise complies with the applicable objective general plan, zoning, and subdivision regulations that are in effect at the time the application is determined to be complete. Objective standards are those that can be independently measured, such as height, density, and lot coverage, rather than subjective criteria. In summary, the applicant is requesting design review for construction of a new 5-story 21-unit condominium building with below-grade parking, a conditional use permit for building height, and a condominium permit. There have been a total of 6 received after communications, which have all been forwarded to you earlier in the day. There are also 2 public comments to be read at the public comment interval when we get to that. But first, I'm available for questions of staff.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to open the public hearing. Would the applicant please come forward and state your name and anything else you would like to add about your project?
So good evening, commissioners. Mark Hudak here on behalf of the project applicant. With me tonight in a virtual manner of speaking is Jane Knopp on behalf of the owners, and Andy Ramundo and Omar Hernandez from RSS Architecture. They are the new design team. First, I'd like to compliment the staff on the thorough staff report that you've received. There is some misinformation floating around and reflected in some of the public comments, but the staff report is very good at showing the current version of the project, and I think addresses at least some of the concerns that are being raised and re-raised in these public comments. As noted, since this was last before you in 2018, the owners brought in a new design team primarily to rethink some of the major issues that had been raised at that meeting. And I'll turn this over soon to Andy and Omar to show how they have addressed those major items, including parking, the height of the building, and the setback issues. Before I do turn it over, though, I want to note that the project does meet the objective criteria that are included in our planning ordinances, and that no variances are required. We hope that with the changes that have been made, this project can move forward. It's a good project. It provides much needed housing, and it'll be a good addition along El Camino. So with that, I'll ask Andy Ramundo to address the design changes that have been made, and then we'll be available for any questions that you have. Thank you all very much.
Chairperson Say, commissioners, thank you very much for the opportunity to present you with this revised version of the project. I would also like to commend, as Mark said, I would like to commend staff in working with us for a little over a year now in trying to resolve what we understood as some of the major issues and the reason for denial the last time this project came before you. The parking structure below grade, which is primarily the piece that we were asked to work on, as we watched the previous hearing, and we reviewed that design and saw how unconventional it was, and certainly understood the comments that were made with respect to how this would impact loading on and off the El Camino Real. The fact was that it was a very deep excavation. So there was some concerns about excavation. And so what we tried to do was come up with a system, albeit still with a car stacking system, something that would load and bring cars in and off of the site in a little more conventional manner. And we think that we've been able to achieve that with our new configuration. Another aspect of the garage and sort of its depth and how it sits on the site is how it relates to the adjacent properties. And so we do understand that the rear of this site, the adjacent property sits below our site. So we felt that it was important to come up with a configuration where we could transition some landscaping along that back edge. And I'll let my project manager, Omar Hernandez, speak about that a little bit. So that was another kind of piece of it. The previous excavation also approached or came nearer to the side property lines a little bit more than this new design does. There's to the north, I guess the northwest of us, there's a pretty large redwood tree that was going to be considerably impacted and may not have survived under the previous design or previous configuration. And so we notched the excavation back and cut the garage back in deference to that existing mature landscaping on the adjacent property. The other component to this, and again, this relates to stacking and how you come onto the site. We've gone from what was previously about a 30-foot depth below grade or excavation. And with this more kind of conventional system that we've stretched out a little bit, we're 17 feet below. So we're considerably higher, or we're considerably less in terms of excavation than previously proposed. And with our configuration, there's also a loading and stacking space that occurs before you get to the stacking system, such that cars can wait in a backup aisle in front of the mechanical loader. So it allows us a little bit more room for stacking. That also reduces the kind of perceived length of the ramp as we come in from the El Camino Real. The building has a walk-up, sort of a walk-up piece to it that we tried to preserve and actually enhance a little bit, which I think we were successful in doing. As far as the building, the building or everything above the podium level, we really haven't changed that much. We have had to do some minor tweaks to the building in terms of getting the vertical circulation to communicate between the new garage configuration and the existing building, or the building as previously designed. But we've left that architecture alone. I think that there were some comments that we saw about height. One thing that I'd like to make note of is that while it is a 5-story building, we've recessed the 5th floor back, or the 5th floor has been recessed back off of the major street facade. And so what you see is kind of the roof level on the 4th floor is what relates in terms of perceived mass to the adjacent properties. And I think the building to the right of us is
7 feet above.
Yeah, so we're about on our 4th floor roof, we're about 7 feet taller than the adjacent building, which is a 3-story building. So I'm going to turn it over to Omar and kind of let him talk more about some specifics, and then we'll leave it to you to ask questions if you have any.
Hi, my name is Omar Hernandez. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present this to you again. So a few points that I believe they're important is the majority of the structure sits about 20 feet away from the neighbor building at 550 El Camino, which it's gonna the depth of the excavation is significantly less. We were at, like Andy mentioned, at 30 feet. Now the majority of the garage is at 11 feet below the finished grade. And the parking structure has a pit, which the lowest point is at 18 feet below grade. The back, the view from the neighbors in the rear, it's not gonna change significantly from what they have right now. The top of the current proposed fence sits around the same height as the existing fence. So we're not increasing that side at all. The excavation, I know there was a concern during the last meeting, the excavation has been reduced roughly about 37%. Even though we have not a step garage, it just, we have a larger footprint. That's why it's only 37.
Your speaker is not working.
Say that again?
Oh, you said the speaker isn't working. Can you hear us?
Can you hear us?
We can hear you fine. I don't know if somebody else was speaking up. I'm not sure. Please continue.
Yes, so along with that, the queuing of the vehicles was a concern. Now we potentially have 4 vehicles waiting in the ramp while we have potentially 8 vehicles waiting to be parked on its own spot. The technology on these parking systems has changed such that now with an application on the phone, you can request the parking stall that belongs to the resident, and it only takes 30 seconds for the parking to appear so that they can park their car. We don't anticipate this generating traffic or backup. I think there's plenty of space. It should work well. And like Kevin mentioned, there's already 3 buildings that have this system, and it's been working successfully. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Sargent? Commissioner Sargent?
Sorry, I'm having problems unmuting there, but I just one question on the landscape plan. The concrete grass pavers, I don't know if that was in the previous application at the entrance there. And I know that's something that's been approved in the city for like secondary parking uses, but that seems like it's going to be get pretty significant traffic. Is that kind of use appropriate for that product?
Yeah, so you're talking about the turf block?
I'm on page L1.
Yeah.
At the entry, going down the ramp, but at grade, it says concrete grass pavers.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, our understanding is, and we've seen it used in a lot of applications, and we don't have any reason to believe that this would be unconventional in terms of how it's used or whether or not it would uphold under the traffic load. We've actually used it in projects where it serves in a fire access area that takes pretty heavy truckloads. So we'll certainly spec it and review the precise product if and when we get to the point that we go into permit documents on this. But we do believe that it is appropriate and usable for this kind of application.
Okay, Commissioner.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Could you repeat the last part? I just got interrupted here.
Oh, that's great. No, I was just saying that we'll certainly, and there's more than one manufacturer of this product, but we've spec'd it in the past in situations similar to this, where it takes quite heavy sort of traffic load and frequency of traffic. And so we'll make sure that we, when we spec it and design it, for construction that it's a usable, durable, and appropriate product for this type of application.
Okay, did you, I'd appreciate that. Did you look at any other ways to meet the front landscape requirement that didn't require the pavers?
Yeah, we had thought about different ways to do it, but we felt like this was the kind of the best approach given the experience of this product and how we've seen it used. Omar, I don't know if you want to add anything, anything more.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're providing roughly about 62%. I guess the requirement was 50%.
Okay.
Landscape. Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Loftus?
First, I'd like to say thank you for addressing the below grade design. As you could tell from the previous meetings, that was a hot topic. And so I want to just ask a few questions about that. So as I understand it now, you've lifted up the excavation about 10 feet and the finished floor or the bottom of excavation is around 18 feet below grade. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, at its lowest point, there's some slope to it, obviously, but at its lowest projection below grade from street level is 18 feet.
The majority, can I say that? The majority of the garage is actually 10 feet below grade. Because of the parking need, we need to have a pit, which the lowest point of the pit is actually at 18 feet.
Okay. Where does that place you in relation to the water table generally? What do you know about the water table there?
Well, there's a report by the geotech engineer, and he makes some recommendation as to how to go about the foundation.
Okay.
He's suggesting to build the walls and the slab for hydrostatic pressure and just put a waterproofing membrane on it.
Okay, and so I noticed that I note that the Public Works comment notes that you'll have to get a permit if you want to pump water out of wherever to El Camino. You'd have to get a permit from Caltrans to do that. Do you anticipate pumping water out to El Camino?
That wouldn't be necessary. I think if we try to pump water out below the water table, they could do it endlessly, and because it's going to cost the owner a lot of money. The idea is just to solve it with a waterproofing membrane and just build it such that they don't have to do that. The drainage on the site is actually being improved. The footprint of the proposed building is actually less than what they currently have. And the civil engineer has introduced or proposed some bioretention tanks that it's going to help considerably to what they have right now.
Okay.
And I'd just like to add as well that the owner understands this is in order to get the parking to support this proposed project, we had to go to the stacking system, and the owner full well understands that there's some expenses in site development that are related to that, and specifically the thing that you're addressing and you're concerned about the water table. We obviously, as the architects, are very concerned about it because it's a liability issue for us, and so that's something that we'll be involved very intimately with in designing a system that we can stand behind and that we're secure in presenting as part of our design package. And it is a concerning issue, but it's something that we believe is achievable.
Yeah, so just allow me to continue I want to make sure that I get all the questions out on this
sure.
On this below grade construction. So you'll build a boat essentially and design it for hydrostatic pressure. The water and the water table will flow around that boat. And so the other place the water could come in is down the ramp. I presume there's clearly going to be a trench drain or something across that. I don't know whether this part of El Camino is prone to flooding. There are parts of El Camino that are prone to flooding, and I don't know if this is one of them. What do you know about that?
I don't know that. Yeah.
Okay.
If I could jump in though, because I'm up and down El Camino in that area all the time. And that's not one of the areas that is, to my recollection, flooded. It's usually on the other side, the west side of El Camino, that you've got significant ponding. And it's a little closer to Howard Avenue than Floribunda, just in my experience.
That's good. I got surprised by a project several years ago in San Francisco that we didn't think flooded, and it turns out it did flood. And we had a ramp down into a basement, a deep excavation about like this, and we had to put a sort of pop-up dam on the ramp. And I didn't know if you were going to have to do that if you got that far in your investigations, but it sounds like you're still working this stuff through, and I understand the boat you'll build, and if it's not flooding on El Camino, then you probably don't have significant water flowing down the ramp. So I'm comforted by that, at least. That's all the questions I have. Thanks.
Commissioner Torrones?
Thank you. Andy and Omar, I guess this is a question for you. There was a topic that was discussed previously, and we were reminded of it by one of our received after letters from Bobby Benson, and that's in regards to some of the guardrails at the balconies. We discussed previously the potential for making them a little bit more solid. So I guess my question is, I know there was a lot more significant issues, particularly in regards to the garage, that were sort of deal killers before, but my question is, do you think there's a way to work the architecture to where maybe it's the lap siding that has a little bit more prominence because you've got the horizontal nature of the what looks like the cable rail guardrails and the glass guardrails? Is there a way to make those a little bit more solid? Perhaps the glass is obscured of some sort so that it still maintains that piece of the architecture. You know, I think it's something that could possibly be worked, and if necessary, came back as an FYI if this moved forward. But my basic question to you guys is that something that you could revisit in the architecture, or have you talked about it with the owners?
Yeah, we've talked a lot about that with the owners, and we had a discussion about it this morning as well. And they are comfortable with doing some kind of a modification, whatever it takes. I don't know what kind of process we would go through. I guess we would work with staff to come up with something that maybe you guys could sign off on, assuming that we get approval this evening. And so it's a kind of remains a fluid piece in terms of the design. Certainly we would look at it as you're suggesting, consider it in a way that is compatible with sort of the style and the architecture that is being exhibited on the buildings currently, but something that is more of a solid screen. And as you're aware, there's quite a few different ways that we can handle that. But we to answer the question directly, we are open to and willing to take some of your suggestions and make some modifications to the railing design.
Understood. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gall?
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. First, on the water, I see in your specs you have that filtration system for pumping out onto the El Camino, and I assume that you've had those discussions with Caltrans. But does Caltrans have a limit? I mean, is there an amount do they monitor that, or the direction I'm going is that I'm familiar with the property on the block to the west or the east of this property, and it has a below grade parking garage, and it continuously year-round pumps water into the city system. But I'm just wondering if Caltrans is gonna, do they have a limit how much water you can pump out?
Well, there was an application going on with Caltrans, and they had a chance to review actually the previous design that was on. They didn't have an objection on it, and they didn't mention any specifics on that. I believe you're talking about water that goes into the garage from rain. Is that right?
No, it's actually groundwater.
Okay. It probably wouldn't be the case on our building, and it's probably not recommended that we remove water from the building because it can cause settlement on the neighboring buildings. So, yeah, I don't think we'll have.
Yeah, well, I think that the building that I'm speaking of, they get the water somehow into the building and need to pump it out, but their pump is running all the time. That's what I'm
Yeah,
wondering.
and they probably have a different system with respect to the integrity of the subgrade walls and their ability to keep water out.
Yeah, so your intention is then any of the groundwater would just remain in place, like Commissioner Loftus said. You're basically just going to build a boat in the water, and
we're going to build a boat.
Okay. Yeah. And then my other question is getting back to the line of questioning that Commissioner Sargent was going down to the fescue bluegrass sod and pavers. So that's considered part of the front landscaping.
Yes.
That counts towards the front landscaping. Also over where you have the electric charging station for the 2 cars.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. If you were to eliminate those 2 electric charging stations, you would still have the required parking, correct?
No, those are actually, it's additional parking that is being provided. It's not under the parking count that we require. It was proposed so that we can have actually parking for guests or service vehicles. If somebody needs to have a delivery for some reason, they can do so in those 2 spaces. But it's not intended for the count of the residents or to be assigned to any residents.
So we do meet parking. We do meet parking without those.
Without those. Okay. So if you were, yeah. Okay. If you were to eliminate those though, would you, I guess what I'm getting at is that I'm struggling with having, basically a parking lot counting as your landscape, part of your landscaping. So if you were to eliminate those, would that satisfy the landscaping requirement? If that was planted as opposed to having the pavers there?
Yeah, well, we're using that as pavers to get to our landscaping requirement. So if that was just a planted area as opposed to an area where you could also park a vehicle, then yes, it would.
If we have to eliminate one.
Yeah,
yes.
and the fact is that it kind of sits back a little bit to get some additional depth as you come in from the driveway cut. So if they weren't there, if those parking spaces weren't there, we could probably extend the landscaping area even a little bit farther. So we might even be able to pick up some additional landscaping. Not a lot, but we could probably pick up a little bit.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have a couple of questions. One about the parking, the stacking system. Oops, let's see. So I know there are 3 bays for the parking stackers. And you mentioned earlier that everyone has an assigned parking space. So when you come in, do you have to go to a specific bay to park your car, or do you is the instruction to kind of go the furthest in to bay 1, for example, and park your car? If somebody comes in at the same time, they go to bay 2.
You go to the specific bay that it's been assigned for your parking stall. And yeah, so and let's say you leave your house in the morning, you have to go to work, you live in this building. So the way to request the parking or your car is by the app. You do so by the app. So by the time you're downstairs, the car's already in front. All the spaces have been shifted.
And likewise, when you're coming in, you can have your space prepared for you when you come in to park.
You make the request as well. Yeah.
I see. Okay. And then secondarily, I also wanted to talk about the railings outside at the balconies. I think, can't help but think of when people are settled into their condos and some people might put their bike out there or furniture and
yes,
laundry, whatever it might be. And it would be nice if it was less visible to the street and keep a neater streetscape by providing more privacy panel at the balcony railings.
Yeah, it's an interesting, we've done so many of these types of projects where you get arguments on the other side where people say, well, we'd like them to be more transparent because it adds to kind of the variegation and sort of in and out feel of the building if they're not solid. And then, as you described, we have people saying they should be solid because you know that people are going to use these as storage areas, and we'd rather not see people's stuff. I think, my personal opinion, if you ask me, I think that that having them solid would actually be consistent with this kind of sort of modern look. Not that the railings as they're being proposed aren't modern, but we can certainly find a material and a pattern that will sort of reinforce the modern architecture of the building and be quite handsome. So I think that for the privacy purpose and the purpose of kind of using, using that railing as a screening device for people's stuff, I think that would work very well, and I think it would probably be preferable myself.
Great, thank you. All right, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on this item? It looks like we have Nick Popovic.
And I'll be timing each person for 3 minutes. We also do have some email comments, but we can start with the raised hands. So let me get ourselves going. And then, yes, if Mr. Popovic would like to start, there are 3 minutes.
Well, thank you so much. Hopefully I'm audible.
Yes.
Yes.
So great. Yeah, thanks to commissioners for the opportunity to express the public comments. I've sent email comments as well, but basically, fundamentally from the neighboring property, which is 1515 Floribanda Avenue, we will be directly impacted. And we don't see much change in this proposal compared to the previous proposals in terms of the both underground water that the commissioners Loftis and Gold have already highlighted, and in terms of the automated parking system that Commissioner has highlighted as well. I think those are all risks that we see in terms of this building causing to neighboring properties into our building. And also with the height of 55 or 56 feet, doesn't seem to be much change from the previous proposal, or it's the same. So it would definitely negatively impact us and impact our view, and also the peaceful enjoyment that we expect to have in the neighborhood. Also, the number of units is, I think, 21, which was the same, but the number of parking spots is now reduced to 33 or 36. And we don't think it's sufficient. We expect to see a lot more traffic on El Camino and also on our Floribanda Avenue, and there is already insufficient parking there. And I would like to remind commissioners that El Camino and Floribanda Avenue have been highlighted by the Parking Commission and the Safety Commission as a high risk intersection, and we already had a number of accidents there. So Burlingame City had to enact a one-way traffic court basically to stop the left signal from El Camino there. And then also just wanted to add in terms of the water, we do see on our side of the property, we do see every year regularly with the rains or otherwise, we do see excess water. So I think bringing another building that would potentially be pumping water to El Camino would be a serious concern to the safety, Caltrans, and the big trees that we all cherish and have on El Camino. I also wanted to express a concern in terms of the potentially having low-income housing being replaced. I wanted to ask commissioners, what is the plan from the Burlingame to actually replace the low-income housing that is available there, which is in the current location? And then finally, I wanted to request that this building proposal has, it has been around for multiple times. Some changes have been made, but we'd like to see a reduction in terms of the height and the size of the property, because if you look at the sheet A11, basically the parking garage is the
Sorry
adjacent.
to interrupt. That's 3 minutes. If you could just conclude your comments with two more sentences, please.
Yeah, just two more sentences. So we would really appreciate if commission would consider the neighbors and reduce the size of the property and the overall footprint so that it fits better in the neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Would anybody else from the public like to speak? Otherwise, we'll go to the letters that we've received.
So we have 3 emails, and again, we have the 3-minute rule. So what I'm going to do, I will read them as quickly as I can, but still be intelligible. But what I will do for each of them is also forward them to the planning commissioners so that if I am not able to read it in 3 minutes, you do have the text of the email. There's one in particular that looks like it may be more than 3 minutes. So, but I will start with this one, and let me just get my clock going. This is from, it is signed by Bobby Benson, 550 El Camino Real, next to 556. This building is too big for its lot, too high for the neighborhood of 3-story buildings, and for traffic, being the first driveway south of Floribunda. Number 1, they'll be digging 33 feet down for 2 parking levels right on the property line. There may very well be structural damage to our building. Number 2, they need to install solid balcony, patio, and deck walls on all 5 stories to provide privacy and peace, affecting hundreds of residents, and it will maintain a neater appearance. Number 3, grossly oversized patios on the south side come within 3 feet of the property line. They need to be scaled back so that no part of those patios comes within the mandated 10-foot setback between condo buildings. Prevailing winds would bring any smoke from those patios right into our windows, and I have asthma. It has happened before. Number 4, the environmental study shows that a dangerous amount of toxic dust will affect all 9 of our condos that face the building. 550 should be completely wrapped on that side with air filters provided for each unit, and our building repeatedly power washed for our health. Number 5, we would appreciate the replacing the fence between us with an 8-foot high solid fence from the front corner of the building to the very back. Number 6, do not allow work to begin until the pandemic is over. Evicting affordable housing residents there now, neighbors who have been there for years before the end of the pandemic, would be heartless. That is the end of that comment. Let me reset. The next comment, first let me forward it to the commissioners by email. Okay, this one may go over 3 minutes, so I will read as much as I can within 3 minutes. And it is signed by John Weiner, W-E-I-N-E-R. I hope I got that right. Dear Commissioners, the project at 556 El Camino has been brought up repeatedly to the Planning Commission. Overall, the project is simply too big and too ambitious. Even to this day, with the current plans, it's clear to see that the only way this project can continue forward is if the overall size is brought down to more realistic expectations. Compared to prior plans, you can see that the overall size of the project hasn't really changed in any significant way. Only minor details have been adjusted and nothing that mitigates current or past concerns. Reviewing the plans, I can see that the parking situation has had attention paid to it, however, is still not a practical proposal. Most objections are in regards to the specific application of an automated car shuffling system and to the space needed for it. While the overall underground area has been reduced from prior proposals, unfortunately, the same problems exist as they did before. There is no solution for the multiple people need their cars at the same time, and if the car shuffling mechanism breaks down, then nobody gets their cars whatsoever until it's fixed. There are also no provisions for plug-in electric vehicles in the underground car shuffling system. As far as I can tell, every vehicle that is there is assumed to be either gas-powered or possibly a hybrid. Anyone with a plug-in electric will need to park outside, occupying one of the only 2 available spaces serving the entire building. That is absurd. Additionally, I still don't see any kind of accommodations for package delivery or grocery store drop-off without impeding ingress and egress from the building. All it takes is a couple of families trying to drop off groceries or strollers simultaneously, and cars will be backed up on El Camino, or people will need to circle the block until space becomes available. The shadow studies clearly show that the size of the structure will cast a large shadow on the neighboring properties, one of them being the property I live at. The worst is the December 21st projection. The only way to address this is to lower the overall height of the project, and that would mean reducing the story count. The bottom line is that the building is simply too big. This is a classic case of trying to fit too much stuff into too small of a package. The building I currently live in is 3 stories tall, and when seeing in person, it is a very large building. The proposed building at 556 El Camino is 2 stories taller than mine, and that is just flat out absurd. While I recognize and appreciate that Burlingame is a growing town, we're not quite to the point where a building of this size fits in. So to summarize, all the problems I have outlined here, and I'm sure any others that are brought to light this evening, can be resolved by the builders doing one simple thing, and that's reducing the overall size of the project. Reducing the building height by 2 stories would alleviate the shadow issue, require less parking area, thereby alleviating the need for an automated car shuffling system, as well as alleviate the need for separate outdoor EV parking and giving more room for package delivery and grocery stroller drop-off. Thank you for your time, John Weir. And actually that had 11 seconds remaining. So that was the full statement. The next email is not signed. I will just read it. Let me turn this off first. Multitasking here. Okay. The intersection of El Camino Real and Floribunda has had many traffic accidents. Please address concerns regarding this large of a building that will increase traffic and also decrease visibility even further. Those are all of the public comments that I see in the public comments at burlingame.org email box.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to speak? I don't see any hands, so I'm going to close the public hearing now. Commissioners, any comments? Commissioner Terrones?
Yes, thank you. Well, I think first and foremost, we have to remind ourselves that not the least of which one of the important criteria that we have to consider is the Housing Accountability Act that compels us to consider and apply standards that are objective for the application. So that being said, I have to look closely at what was before us previously versus what's before us now. And what was before us previously that we had a lot of angst over that could potentially affect properties in the neighborhood was the garage design system, the parking system. And I think what we have now is a far better design. It's a stacker system that we've allowed previously in other projects. It's much different than the sort of vending machine option that we had before, for lack of a better description. And so we have, as the architect had pointed out, a more, quote, traditional design, traditional being a new state-of-the-art context in terms of the stacker systems, but nonetheless, again, something that we've approved previously. So I think the major issues have been addressed with the revised plans, except for the one issue being the details on the architecture in terms of the guardrails. And I appreciate the fact that the architect is willing to go back and revisit that. I think that that's something that could either go back to staff and be considered, and if they want to raise that to a level of an FYI or even an amendment, they could do so. What I'm hearing from the applicant is that they are not going to be pumping groundwater out onto El Camino Real. They're going to build a system that can sit and allow the groundwater to do what it's doing. I hear Commissioner Gall's concerns in terms of the front landscaping and, being asked to consider the turf block solution as part of the landscaping, but I, for one, would much prefer considering that turf block as part of the landscaping if it means getting those 2 additional visitor and or service vehicle parking spaces in the front of the building, particularly because of this location. Not something that's required, but I think that's something that's important for this application. So all those things in summary, I fully recognize the fact that there will be a substantive change in this location, but with the analysis that's been put before us in terms of the environmental review and the revisions that have been presented, I think that the project could and should move forward. Thank you.
Commissioner Loftus?
Yeah, I'd love to follow Commissioner Toronis because then all I have to do is say I agree with everything that he said. I wanted to make the point that the staff report makes it very clear that the project meets the objective standards that it needs to meet. And I certainly understand the neighbors' concerns, and it will have an experiential impact on the neighbors. And I'm afraid that's the nature of living in an urban environment, or I would consider this an urban environment, semi-urban environment, whatever. You know, there are no rights to views as far as I know, and there's no right to like beyond that provided by the setbacks. That's what these regulations are for. The setback regulations are to allow, you know, light and air between buildings, and this meets the objective. So I'm much more comfortable with the below grade solution than I was the first time. That had all sorts of trouble written all over it, and it seems to be better, you know, better addressed in this application. And I agree with Commissioner Toronis, the project should move forward.
Commissioner Gall?
Yeah, I agree with most of the comments that have been made, but I still do have a little bit of trouble with this. You know, we are going to be adding quite a bit to our system. And on a separate discussion, we can get into the impact fees. But you know, just as a quick count, I saw 44 toilets in this building, whereas when I walk through the building that's there and I go through the parking garage, it appears that each unit has one toilet. So, you know, there's an increase just in toilets of 30 toilets. You know, there's going to be an additional, you know, there's going to be dishwashers in the kitchen. So there's going to be an increase in the water use. I have a concern about how much water we're going to be using and the impact that it's going to have on the city's infrastructure. And that has a lot to do with, you know, the size of the units, because the units that are there now have one person in them, typically, I would think, because they're small. These are larger units. They're going to have a lot more people, so there's going to be a lot more use. But my biggest concern is that basically what I'm understanding from the landscape plan is that we have this system that kind of looks like the lawn, and so we're counting that as landscape space. And what we're saying is, okay, well, great, it's landscaping, and you can park on the lawn now. And I don't think that that's a reasonable way to come up with a landscape plan, because if we do that, we're going to have this all along the El Camino. We're not going to have the vegetation and the planting that we want. And you know, we've all drive through down the El Camino, up and down the El Camino, San Mateo and Millbrae, and they're pretty stark compared to Burlingame. Everybody comments on how lush Burlingame is because of all of our trees, and we do have a requirement for 50% coverage on the landscape. And I don't see where you can count this as, you know, a parking area or a driveway and as landscaping space as well. I agree that you need a place to have deliveries and guest parking. I think those are necessities in a project like this with the size of it. But what it boils down to for me is it feels like they're working too hard to come up with loopholes to fit a lot of building onto a site that doesn't quite handle it. So I don't know that I can support the project as it stands.
Commissioner Sargent?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I would agree with most of what's been said about the project. It's hard to believe. I've been on the Planning Commission for 8 years now, and I think this project has been before the Planning Commission in every year that I've been on it. So we've been at it for quite some time, and it's come in an incredible distance since the first project that was proposed. And the only thing I'd add to the remarks that have been made are regarding the environmental impact statement, and it addressed a couple of the concerns that the neighbors and members of the community brought up, which was the traffic and the parking, and found that they wouldn't have significant impacts on either of those things. So I think that's important to consider in our consideration of this project. And I would agree with Commissioner Toronis on the parking, having the additional parking, because if staff can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think those parking spots are required up front, and I think they'll be a really nice addition to the project. I share Commissioner Gall's concern, but about the applicable, whether that those blocks can be used there. But I think I'd be comfortable if the applicant could come back with a FYI on the suitability of those blocks for high traffic areas like the entrance ramp would be. So I'm able to support the project primarily because I think that they've addressed the one real concern that I think we had in the last meeting, as others said, which is that underground parking.
Commissioner Schmidt?
Yes, I echo what the other commissioners have said, and the one I want to reiterate is just the railing design. I would like to see, I don't know that it needs to be totally opaque or totally built in, but I think that some degree of obstacle needs to be there to help provide some privacy, and maybe even as much more so on the sides as you're facing your neighbors there that are much closer. You know, from the El Camino side, you're not going to have quite as many people as close, but I think on those side patios and decks, they're obviously a lot closer to their neighbors. And I would like to reiterate that point. Thanks.
Commissioner Camarado?
Yeah, so I think I've seen this project come before me 3 times now, at least. Think they've made good progress. I think one of our biggest concerns was the water table issue below for the parking. I do think that, again, some of that privacy with the balconies that was brought up at the last meeting, that we really need to kind of create some privacy for the other neighbors nearby. I also think that if they could work with one of the neighbors regarding the fence, and also some of the keeping it clean and keeping kind of controlled debris going into the neighbors during construction would be greatly appreciated. I'm sure staff will help with that. So.
Okay, anybody like to make a motion? Commissioner Toronis?
Yes, I'll make a motion. Well, hold on a second. Let me make sure I get this right. Proper action. I'll make a motion. Well, let me ask staff, is it okay to make a motion on all of the various actions at once, or would you like?
Yes, you may. This is a little different. In the past, we've broken up when there's been a separate environmental document, but in this case, it's treated like an exemption. So you can make all of the motions in one motion.
Okay, thank you. I'll make a motion to approve the condominium permit, approve the design review based on the recommendations of findings in the staff report, approve the conditional use permit for height and the tentative condominium map for the project, with the added condition that the exterior architecture on the balcony railings would be revisited by the architecture, and staff could determine if that should come back as an FYI or an amendment.
Commissioner Sargent?
Yeah, I'll second the motion, but I also wanted to ask the maker of the motion if he'd consider adding as part of the FYI request, more information on the grass pavers.
Okay, yes, an added condition that the some technical specifications on the options for the turf block pavers be brought before us. I would note that there was a previous project, I believe it was the one on the one over here that's going to go in where the restaurant is. Sorry to be so vague. It's the one where one's going to go where that place used to be.
1095 Rollins.
Previous project that was approved and went through with the fire department for turf block pavers in the fire lane area. But yes, an added condition that technical specifications on options for the turf block be presented as an FYI.
I renew my second.
Okay, thank you. So we have a motion by Commissioner Termones, seconded by Commissioner Sargent. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call for a roll call vote.
Commissioner Camarado,
Aye.
Commissioner Gall,
Nay.
Commissioner Loftus,
Aye.
Commissioner Sargent,
Aye.
Commissioner Schmid,
Aye.
Commissioner Taronis,
Aye.
Chair Say.
Aye. So the motion passes 6-1-0-0. An action by the Planning Commission is appealable to the City Council within 10 days of the Planning Commission's action. If the Planning Commission's action has not been appealed or called up for review by the City Council by 5 p.m. on the 10th day, the action becomes final. In order to be effective, appeals must be in writing and must be accompanied by an appeal fee of $1,046, including notice and costs. Congratulations.
Thank you, everybody. We appreciate your time and your service.
Thank you. Sorry, Mr. Popovic, our public part of the hearing is closed.
Oh, okay, okay. I mean, that's fine. I mean, I will send follow-up email.
Okay, thank you. So moving on to item number 9, design review study items. There are no design review study items this evening. And then we're on to commissioners' reports. Does anyone have a commissioner's report? No. Number 11, we have, oh, sorry, Commissioner Taronis.
I will say that staff has reached out and is attempting to schedule a meeting of the Neighborhood Consistency Subcommittee.
Thank you. Number 11, director's reports.
There are 2 FYIs, 133 Clarendon Road and 4 La Mesa Court. And let me just speak for La Mesa Court. There was an email correspondence with some questions. In response, I'll say as much that the items raised in the email can be addressed with the city arborist prior to the final inspection. Also, that there is the following condition of approval in place for the project, that if any existing tree on the site dies within 5 years of the final inspection of the project, it shall be replaced with a new 36-inch box tree with a species determined to be appropriate by the city arborist. New trees shall be replaced in the same location unless it is determined by the city arborist that the location should be adjusted based on site conditions. So I'm just mentioning that in that the email was asking those questions. I couldn't tell if it was asking to pull the item or just ask for those clarifications. So I wanted to be able to provide that to the commission.
Thank you. Do any commissioners want to pull any of these items for future review? We're talking about an FYI for 133 Clarendon Road and FYI for 4 La Mesa Court. I see no comments, so I believe the answer is no. Are there any other announcements, communication? Oh, Commissioner Taronis?
I just want to say that Commissioner Zay, you did a wonderful job first time this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And with that, our meeting is adjourned at 9:11 p.m.
Good job. Thank you. Good night,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Have a good week.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.